Hello everyone, it's Carrie. Happy Saturday. Welcome back. I want to talk about last week's Women's March that happened last Saturday because it was really huge and incredible to see that many people, although somehow it was not that surprising to me to see that many people who really came out in support of the platform and women's rights and people's rights in general, I think. And it's been a wild ride this first week, so definitely gave voice to a lot of people who need it, I think. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is kind of twofold. Because first of all, I've seen and heard a lot of people talking about how the Women's March worked for trans people, like how they were represented or not. I wanted to give you my personal thoughts on that as a genderqueer, non-binary person who doesn't use any of those binary terms for myself. I realize, well, my shirt says, well, I don't like gendered language. Like, I do appreciate the fact that I can be a total pretty boy, and like there are phrases like that I'm fine with, obviously. Anyway, the second thing that I want to kind of address and kind of use Women's March as an example, or as one example, is one of my major pet peeves. When you're a person who is engaged in very liberal politics, sometimes people kind of take things to the extreme to the point that I think it's detrimental to us. So first of all, my own thoughts on whether or not the march was like inclusive of trans women. I think that overall it was. I think that was part of like the original platform. I know trans women spoke at the main march. Trans women marched. I haven't really heard a lot of trans men talking about it, oddly enough. I have seen some non-binary or otherwise like gender non-conforming identified people talk about being a little frustrated with some of the language as well. And I think like when you see signs that have reproductive organs on them, like uterus and fallopian tubes, some of that was in direct response to some things that Donald said. And I think that's completely appropriate because it's a direct response to that. And I also, I get that those are the reproductive organs that are being legislated. And so from that perspective, to me, it makes sense that people would maybe have signage and things with those images because it can be very empowering to take back and very bold and very direct. And also you only have so much room on a sign. At the same time, I can get how, especially for anyone who has especially a lot of dysphoria around those specific body parts. I'm trying to speak generally for people's comfort levels here, but you know what I'm getting at. I can see how that is also maybe a bit uncomfortable for them, or in maybe some extreme cases could be a bit triggering if like a sign indicated that the only way to be a woman is to have certain parts. Which I'm not saying it didn't happen, because I obviously wasn't at every single march in the world. But from what I saw, I didn't necessarily think that I saw anything that way. So, even a year or two ago, Planned Parenthood had a campaign basically that was about trusting women. And there was a lot of feedback to people about how that really excluded trans men, trans women, non-binary people who also use these services. But I also, because I can be kind of highly logical to a fault, get that a lot of that legislation and the dialogue around reproductive rights really comes down to whether or not people trust other people to make decisions. And the people making those decisions, like the legislation or pro-life groups, tend to lack nuance in terms of how they view a person's gender identity. So I get that saying trust women was a quick slogan that really got to the heart of what the problem is. Is it the best slogan? I don't know. But I got it, and so I didn't feel personally offended or excluded by it. But I get why other people would. I get both sides of that argument, and people can always do better. Always can do better. And there were even some people who had some very trans positive signs that I saw, which I thought was great and amazing. I don't know that I saw anything that was specifically about non-binary, genderqueer type genders. And it's possible it's just because I didn't see it, not because it didn't exist. Just kind of interesting, and I do get how not ever having your gender recognized is annoying. But I kind of want to, like I said, parlay this into this kind of pet peeve of mine about really progressive politics. And that is that we have really high standards, as we should, for everyone, all of the time. And when something doesn't meet every single one of our criteria, we jump on it and are quick to disagree with it or dismantle it or not support it, instead of understanding that things do have nuance. And especially when you're dealing with legislative issues, that things do unfortunately take time, and there's some give and take there. So you might be able to pass laws that address 3 issues, but not the other 8 issues that are really important to you. And that doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, mean we should automatically say we're not going to support it at all anymore. Like, sometimes you have to compromise and give and take and build on things and work together to get there. And I think really that is the biggest difference sometimes between how conservative movements function and progressive movements function. Because conservative movements are very, I don't know if they're black and white, but everyone is on board with everything, even when it's ridiculous, but they get stuff done. And then we have these like very liberal progressive people who are arguing over minutia sometimes, and as a result we don't get things done as effectively as we could, in my opinion. But I'm going to give you kind of an example that, aside from the Women's March, and it has to do with gender markers on documents. So I'm at a point where, like, the next thing that I would really like to be able to do transition-wise is change all of my gender markers on my documents. I've kind of been at this place for a while, but I don't have an option to change them to what I want to change them to. Whether that's to leave them blank, have like a non-binary, an X, something that's not male or female. And I have the option of changing them to male, except for my birth certificate, because I can't ever change that in the state I was born in with current laws. Which I'm actually like, whatever. It's really like about the IDs I use all the time. So my driver's license, on my passport, I would really like to reflect an accurate gender. And yeah, I could change them to male because I'm presented more and more aligned to that, but it's not me, and so I'm not there yet. So I'm probably not going to do that, just kind of on principle too. Like, I really want that non-binary option someday. But at the same time, we're starting to slowly see some options for people who are intersex to get that changed on birth certificates and other documentation. And I think that's really fantastic and great. And yes, that still leaves me out, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't celebrate and support that change for 2 reasons. First and foremost, most importantly to me, is because it's the right thing for that group of people, for intersex people, to be able to have that option. And then on a very like selfish but less important scale is because it is a step towards that option for myself eventually someday, right? Like, as that becomes more normalized and more common, it becomes easier to push for other options. So there are people who will say, well, that's great that there's intersex, but there's still not these other options, and so it's not good enough. Well, it's not good enough, but it's not bad, and that doesn't mean that because it's not good enough, we shouldn't embrace it and use it to build step on. But that was just kind of my thoughts on like the Women's March. Like, I totally supported it. I'm gonna support the Science March and the LGBT March that's planned for their Pride weekend in DC, and whatever else comes down the pipe. Pike? I don't know which is correct. Yeah. Like, it's the first week of this guy's presidency, and I've had to follow alternative Twitter accounts for like the Park Service. Like, we gotta organize and get together and pick our battles sometimes, I guess is what I'm saying. So, yay progress. I don't know. I'm gonna talk more about that gender marker thing at some point because I'm really frustrated by it right now.